With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, ag considerations for indoor heat illness regulations. We'll have more on that coming up. But our top story today, some crop production areas are reporting drought coverage on the rise since mid-June, as reflected in the latest U.S. Drought Monitor Commodities and Drought Outlook. Here's Rod Bain with more.
Reasonably good news for most crop growing areas regarding drought coverage, according to USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey, who starts with,
by July 2nd, 7% of the U.S. corn crop drought, 9% of the soybean production area.
Compared to June 11 totals of 2% of corn production area and 1% of bean growing area in drought.
So not a huge concern yet, but certainly watching the creep of drought into parts of the central and the eastern corn belt.
A mixed bag of drought coverage is found with southern grown crops, with significant increases in cotton and peanut production areas.
One southern crop that has escaped drought to this point is rice. We see that from the conditions, very good at this point in the growing season.
Just 6% of the spring wheat crop is covered in drought as of July 2nd. However, hay and cattle inventory in drought has significantly increased since mid-June. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Corn and soybean markets reacted strongly to the latest USDA reports on planted acreage and stocks. Gary Crawford reports.
A 16-cent drop in corn prices, or as one analyst put it, a bloodbath in corn prices. That's how the markets reacted this past Friday, right after USDA released its reports on planted acreage and grain stocks, both of which showed
just a little bit more corn than folks had anticipated, I think.
USDA's chief economist Seth Meyer, the report had corn acreage at 91.5 million acres. Yes, that is down still 3% from last year. But Seth Meyer says compared to what farmers said back in March that they intended to plant,
corn acreage was up 1.4, a little over 1.4 million acres from intentions. And that was on the higher end of the range of trade expectations. I think the trade generally thought maybe we gained 500,000 acres, but we gained 1.4 million acres. So that's on the higher end of trade expectations.
USDA also reported corn stocks pretty hefty, just under 5 billion bushels, up 22% from a year ago.
And I think another issue with this is, at least at the way that NASS measures it, farmers are holding a bigger share of those stocks relative to last year as well, too.
USDA reported that as of June 1st, corn stored on farms up 37% from June 1st a year ago.
So stocks rising, production rising, those stocks being held on farm. Now, they could be forward sold, but let's hope that some of the farmers got some of that priced at better levels.
Or maybe they had some soybeans to sell, because within a few minutes after the USDA numbers came out on beans.
Beans are actually up 9 and a little, almost 10 cents, or about 0.9% increase.
USDA reported June 1st soybean stocks at 970 million bushels, up 22% from June a year ago. But Seth Meyer says,
I don't think the overall stock level was terribly out of line. It's basically in the center of trade expectations. And so perhaps that is why we're seeing bean prices rise, because the market wasn't so surprised about the changes in stock levels, and we got maybe a little bit of support in terms of overall area in beans as well, too.
USDA says farmers have planted 86.1 million acres to soybeans, up 3% from a year ago, pretty much, though, what was expected. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. In today's National Spotlight, what is the makeup and breakdown of a new federal strategy to reduce food loss and waste and increase recycling of organic materials? Rod Bain reports.
What are the pillars of a new national strategy focused on reducing food loss and waste and recycling organics in our country?
To prevent food loss, prevent food waste, increase the recycling rate for all organic waste, to support policies that incentivize and encourage the prevention of food loss and waste and organics recycling.
That's Jean Busby. She is USDA's Food Loss and Waste Liaison within the Office of the Chief Economist. She says the recently announced national strategy is a joint effort created by the White House, Environmental Protection Agency, and Food and Drug Administration.
It's been a long time coming. It's been in the cooker for a while.
With the draft strategy first released in December 2022, followed by a period of public comment that included over 10,000 comments.
And these actions outlined in the national strategy really identify concrete steps and complementary USDA, EPA, and FDA actions that are really going to accelerate the prevention of food loss and waste where possible and the recycling of organic waste.
That acceleration's importance, according to Busby, is noted in the federal government's goal to reduce domestic food loss and waste by the year 2030.
What many people may not know is that 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption never gets eaten by people. In fact, food is the single most common material found in landfills, and 61% of methane generated by decomposing landfill food waste is not captured by landfill gas collection systems and is released into the atmosphere.
Some examples of actions that can be taken through the strategy by USDA and stakeholders include the following.
To optimize the harvest or collection of raw commodities and food, such as to get excess wholesome food to those in need, such as through the emergency food assistance programs, farm to food bank projects, to really educate and engage children and youth about food waste and ways to reduce it. The collection and processing of food loss and waste and other organic materials, such as yard and tree trimmings, that would otherwise be landfilled or incinerated, and turning them into new products, such as soil amendments from composting food scraps and soaps and bone meal from rendering, will provide subject matter expertise and technical assistance to help federal agency, tribes, territories, states, and local governments as requested on policy approaches and options to reduce food loss and waste.
More details can be found online at www.usda.gov/food loss and waste. All one word. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
High-tech equipment means farmers need more high-end shops. Here's Chad Smith with more.
New high-tech farm equipment is not only helping farmers be more productive, it's also driving demand for larger, more high-end farm shops. Dennis Lee is the farm product line manager for Morton Buildings.
As farm equipment's gotten larger, there's been a growing need for new farm shops to become more modern to accommodate those machines. A building that was suitable for your grandpa's 4020 is probably not a good fit for your new 9RX. It's particularly true with farmers who previously stored equipment outdoors. We used to see quite a few cold storage or open-sided type buildings, and the trend now is to more climate-controlled, conditioned, more modern farm shops to protect those enormous investments. And the other factor that we see is the huge demand for used equipment. Used equipment values continue to skyrocket, and we all know that equipment stored inside demands a much higher price at auction day.
Lee says many farmers are also incorporating higher quality components in their shop to support the maintenance of their high-tech equipment.
I had the fortune of managing our NASCAR account prior to taking on the farm market, and I'm seeing more and more farm buildings that are taking components or cues from even the NASCAR industry. So we're seeing higher levels of finishes, higher levels of technology. This can include things like LED lighting, epoxy flooring, the large high-volume fans, air hose systems, and we've even seen quite a few buildings with clean spaces for computer server rooms and areas for diagnostics and calibration of planter components or GPS pictures on tractors and that type of thing.
He notes that shop doors are also continuing to get bigger and more sophisticated.
The door is typically the most interacted with portion of your building, where historically to get the large format openings required for planters or harvesters, we had no choice but to go with the sliding door. Sliding door is a very utilitarian feature. Makes a big opening, relatively long-lasting, but they do have their drawbacks. You're not going to have a great weather seal for these new conditioned buildings. You got to get out of the tractor and muscle the door open. And we're seeing more and more buildings go with either the large sectional overhead style doors or even the large hydraulic doors. And that's actually a technology that's been borrowed from the commercial airplane hangar industry. Those doors can span sometimes up to 100 feet.
For more information on farm shop design, visit mortonbuildings.com. Chad Smith reporting.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's John Harris with the Livestock Report.
U.S. beef exports posted another strong month in May. U.S. Meat Export Federation President and CEO Dan Hallstrom has the details.
The second largest volume month of the year so far at 110,000 metric tons. It's the highest value month in the last year, the highest since June of 2023 at a little over 900 million. And I think there's a couple of drivers. You look at the numbers for Japan, 21,000 tons, up 9%. Mexico continues to perform well, up 9%. And another region that performed well in the month of May was the ASEAN region, led by the Philippines, but also Indonesia and Singapore had fairly good months with a total of 4,600 metric tons, up 25%. And a real attractive thing about the ASEAN is that the value at $40.6 million is the seventh highest on record.
Pork exports in May were at 251,000 metric tons, down only slightly from a huge 2023 number.
Mexico is down on volume just a little bit, 6% down at 91,000 metric tons. But the good news is that on the value side, even though we're down a little bit on volume, we're up a little bit on value. So it's another month in excess of $200 million, actually almost $202 million for Mexico. We continue to see the benefit of seamless trade there, led by hams, but we're starting to see shoulder meat, picnics, butts. We're starting to see loins. We're starting to see more variety meats. So it's really broad-based growth on Mexico. But it doesn't stop with Mexico. Korea, 2 months in a row with a very big numbers, 22,000 metric tons, up 6%. This is off of the huge month in April. Central America, up 11%. Colombia, another huge month, similar to April, up 54% at 9,700 tons.
For more, please visit usmef.org. For the U.S. Meat Export Federation, I'm John Harris.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. For the Conservationist of the Year, what goals would you like to see occur this year?
So this is continuing work as the Certified Crop Advisor Conservationist of the Year. They're looking for certified crop advisors who are trying to aid farmers in getting information or conservation practices. One thing we've identified that is keeping farmers from getting conservation practices is actually just information and products. The current federal regulations actually were written in the 1950s. And at that time, those rules were only restricting fertilizers and pesticides. They didn't put into account other developing technologies such as plant biostimulants and some of these newer technologies we're using in agriculture. And so for 2024, our goal is to really help change the laws that are impacting biostimulant regulation to allow them to be used and treated as a fertilizer, not as a pesticide.
So what does that process look like to go through that and get that change to be where it needs to be?
Well, actually, there's a very long on-ramp. We've been working on this since 2014, and the bricks that we've laid on this path are now hopefully being included in the Farm Bill. So more than anything now, it's just supporting the work we've already done, trying to get legislators aware of the problem and hopefully enact those rules. There's an act right now by California regulators. It's called the Plant Biostimulant Act. And so the best thing that farmers can do is call up and say, hey, we support this language. This is going to give us more tools to enact those conservation practices and have more products available to us.
To get to know more about Live Earth Products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with today's AgNet West headlines, here's Brian German.
The effort to try and mitigate the impacts from impatiens necrotic spot virus has been a tremendous undertaking in recent years. VP of Environmental Science and Resources at Braga Fresh, Eric Morgan, described their experience dealing with INSV over the past few seasons.
2022 was a bloodbath. It was pretty horrible for us across the board, continual crop losses. In some cases, what we actually did was move product to more kind of edge areas, trying to be out the heart of the Salinas Valley. We had a real hot spot on our home ranch, and we're losing everything. So move stuff north, move stuff south, move stuff to Hollister, move stuff to San Ardo. It may not be in the slot slot that we're normally in, but trying to get away from where all the disease was. On the conventional side and the organic side, largely the products that we have are not really that effective at this point on thrips or losing efficacy. And then in 2023, there was some around, but there was no catastrophic crop loss. And really even this year, not a whole lot of reports on it. The incidence level is low. We're not out of the woods yet. We still have some time to go to worry about that. We do have some varieties that we started, evaluating last year, and some growers are using those varieties that are more resistant to it. My understanding is they grow pretty rapidly. A more vigorous growth kind of can grow past it to some degree. So, there has been some, development on the breeding side that's been helpful.
The National Dairy Farmers Assuring Responsible Management Program has released new versions of its animal care and workforce development programs to enhance standards and practices in dairy farming. The Animal Care version 5 includes updates on euthanasia, transport fitness, calf management, and education based on the latest industry research and developed with input from experts. These standards will be in place until 2027. The Workforce Development version 2 improves the evaluation tool for HR and safety practices, adding questions on communication and performance management. The Environmental Stewardship version 3 introduces a new greenhouse gas model from Cornell University to help dairy farmers achieve GHG neutrality by 2050. The updated tools aim to provide better benchmarks and support for dairy producers in meeting industry standards and customer demands. For more information, you can visit nationaldairyfarm.com. New resources have been developed to help simplify the process for businesses looking to sell products and services to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The updates include a Contracting with USDA site that offers helpful information and answers common questions about USDA procurement. Improvements to the Vendor Capability Submission Portal have also been made to allow businesses to easily submit their capabilities to USDA, and the USDA Procurement Forecast tool has been updated for better search and filter functions, showing nearly 6,000 contract opportunities for fiscal year 2024. These efforts aim to make contracting more accessible, especially for small businesses. USDA awarded over $11 billion in contracts in fiscal year 2023 and plans similar spending in 2024. Businesses can find more information and resources on the USDA website. The Cal OSHA Standards Board has passed an indoor heat illness prevention standard. President and CEO of AgSafe, Teresa Keene, highlighted some of the requirements for ag employers.
They're going to be required to, of course, provide cool drinking water. So it's going to mimic what we do for outdoor heat in terms of quantity, making sure that it is cool, that you have enough. What does replenishment look like? Those types of things. We're also going to need to have a cool down area, a temperature where it's maintained less than 82 degrees. So employees have a place to go. So wherever that looks like, so is there an office that is air conditioned that you can have your employees go and take their cool down breaks? Thinking about what that might look like for you. Cool down breaks are going to also be required. And then, of course, you're going to need to provide training and then doing your record keeping.
The 8th annual Field Day at the Cal Poly Strawberry Center is coming up next month. This year's in-person event is scheduled for Thursday, August 8th at the Cal Poly Strawberry Center in San Luis Obispo. A welcome and introduction will begin at 8:30 in the morning, with rotating educational sessions set to begin just before 9 o'clock. Topics of discussion will range from the newest automation technology to predatory mites to soil-borne pathogens of strawberry and more. Participants rotate through stations hearing from Cal Poly students and staff about the latest research taking place at the Strawberry Center. Simultaneous Spanish translation will be provided for the event, and CCA and DPR continuing education units are pending approval. More information about the Field Day is available on the upcoming events page at agnetwest.com. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
A new human vaccine for bird flu is in the works. That's coming up on This Land of Ours. Moderna will get $176 million in federal funding from the Department of Health and Human Services to develop a human vaccine against highly pathogenic avian influenza. The grant follows outbreaks of the virus in dairy cattle throughout several states. The U.S. has documented 3 cases of humans with bird flu so far this year, and all had regular contact with dairy cattle. As of this month, more than 130 herds in 12 states have been infected by the H5N1 virus. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra says they've successfully taken the lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic and used them to better prepare for future public health crises. He says as a part of that, they continue to develop new vaccines and other tools to help address influenza and bolster pandemic response capabilities. The funding was made available through the federal-level Rapid Response Partnership Vehicle and allows Moderna to enhance vaccine response capability. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Funding is now available to help get rural renewable energy projects going. Chad Smith has more.
The USDA announced $145 million in funding for 700 loan and grant awards through the Rural Energy for America program, or REAP. The funds can help agricultural producers and rural small business owners make energy efficiency improvements and renewable energy investments to reduce energy costs, generate new income, and strengthen the resiliency of their operations. Successful REAP funding applicants must demonstrate the proposed project has technical merit, which is another way of saying fundamental energy concepts must be incorporated into the system design to ensure a viable project. Tony Jimenez, senior researcher for the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, says it's important to understand basic energy concepts such as the difference between energy and power.
They're related but different and tend to be used interchangeably. Even people in the industry are sloppy in their terminology. Energy is a quantity akin to distance or the amount of water in a bathtub. Think of it as an amount of something. Typical units of energy are kilowatt hours or BTUs. Power is a rate. It's akin to velocity or the flow rate through a faucet. Power is the rate at which energy is being created, moved, or used. Typical units include kilowatts and BTUs per hour. Going back to the bathtub analogy, energy would be the amount of water in the bathtub, and power would be the flow rate of water through the faucet. Energy equals power multiplied by time. So that's how they're related. Energy equipment is typically rated in terms of peak power because that's the threshold beyond which the item may be damaged. The peak power rating says nothing about how much power the device will actually produce, transport, or consume, and it really depends on how the item is used and the situation.
It's important to understand how to estimate power and energy production for an envisioned system.
When sizing your behind-the-meter system, compare the system's estimated annual energy production with your anticipated annual consumption. In general, the system's annual energy consumption should not greatly exceed the annual energy consumption of the facility it serves without a good reason. This is less a technical issue than economics. Oversized systems tend to have poor economic performance than systems that are appropriately sized, and most installers will help you size your system appropriately. Or other items to understand are the interconnection requirements and compensation for electricity sent to the grid. Interconnection and net metering are two different things, often kind of used interchangeably. Interconnection is, can you attach your thing to the grid? Typically, in most jurisdictions, there's a process for determining that. Net metering is a way you get compensated for energy you send to the grid. Just because you don't have net metering doesn't mean you can't interconnect. It simply means that energy from your system sent to the grid has less financial benefit to you than the same energy consumed on site. Additional items to note are the applicable regulatory thresholds. For example, if the net metering applies to systems up to, say, 10 kilowatts, then from a financial performance perspective, you probably don't want to go with an 11 kilowatt system because then you won't be eligible for net metering. Similarly, if the easiest interconnection process applies to facilities up to 25 kilowatts, is it really worth it to have that 26 kilowatt system and do the extra paperwork and pay the higher fees? Be mindful of thresholds and don't exceed them by a small amount without a good reason.
He talks about other aspects of the application that might be helpful.
I think if applicants discuss their load, their annual consumption, and they might have to go seasonal, but at least they should provide annual figures, annual production. They'll help the reviewer a lot and give them a warm fuzzy that the applicant has appropriately sized their system and knows what they're doing.
Understanding basic energy concepts will make it easier for USDA REAP applicants to design viable systems and demonstrate the technical merit of the projects they're proposing. Agricultural producers and rural small business owners who want to learn more fundamental concepts can visit the National Renewable Energy Laboratory's Energy Basics. Go to nrel.gov to learn more. Anyone interested in applying for USDA's REAP funding is encouraged to contact their local USDA state energy coordinators for more information. Interested applicants can also visit rd.usda.gov. Enter Rural Energy for America in the search box. Remaining application windows in 2024 end on June 30th and September 30th. Reporting for the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, I'm Chad Smith.
Dry conditions are threatening crops in both Carolinas. Here's Mike Davis with the story.
Dry conditions are threatening crops in both Carolinas. I'm Mike Davis. This is today's topic. North Carolina Farm Service Agency Director Bob Etheridge tells SFN the damage to some crops is irreversible.
The corn crop, for all practical purposes, is pretty well gone, except in some of the black land areas down east where the ground is a little heavier and they've had a little bit of water. And there's spots where they could have got some rain. No matter how much rain we get, they're probably not going to have much of a corn crop.
Etheridge says other crops have also been impacted.
Soybeans, some have already died depending on the age because of the drought. I take my home county as an example of my son farms. We didn't have any rain from the 15th of May until this past weekend. There we got 3/10. Some people got 8, some people got in varying amounts. But we're still going to have spots across the state. Sweet potatoes are suffering. Almost every crop is in some way impacted. And tobacco is going to, I don't think we know yet what kind of quality it's going to be come harvest time. But I would venture to say, on average, it's going to be, the quality won't be what anticipated.
South Carolina Ag Commissioner Hugh Weathers says parts of his state saw a little rain on Sunday night, but not nearly enough after a month of almost none.
We got 3/4 of an inch of rain on top of 3/10 earlier, maybe Thursday night. So, that's an inch in our area, but it certainly is going to help, but I don't know how much. We got a lot of catching up to do.
In North Carolina, State Ag Commissioner Steve Troxler notes almost the entire state is very dry or worse.
You look at the drought monitor and where we are, and we actually have 99 of our 100 counties in some stage of drought. 57 of them are in moderate drought, and 42 are abnormally dry, but you add heat to that, and it does make it pretty critical.
And just a few weeks ago, both states were in very good shape, with some talking about bumper crops. Etheridge points out the difference from May until now is all due to the weather.
In May, before the 15th of May, had the best crop all across the state. From the mountains to the coast were just terrific. But when a flash drought hits, which I'd never heard of that before, we now know what a flash drought is. It stops raining, the temperatures soar, and it looks like we're going to see temperatures jack back up starting the 4th. So we don't know where this is going to end. And I think it screams to all of us that the weather's changing.
Those drought ratings could be worse when the next drought monitor report is released this week. I'm Mike Davis.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back. You are listening to the AgNet News Hour. Brian German has today's featured interview.
I am Eric Morgan, Vice President of Environmental Science and Resources at Braga Fresh.
And last time we talked, it was quite a bit about INSV and thrip issues. So just kind of want to get a recap of what this season was like versus the last couple of seasons. I know it's been fairly problematic.
Yeah, so I would say we're in 2024 now. 2022 was a bloodbath. It was pretty horrible. For us across the board, continual crop losses. In some cases, what we actually did was move product to more kind of edge areas, trying to be out the heart of the Salinas Valley. We had a real hot spot on our home ranch, and we're losing everything. So move stuff north, move stuff south, move stuff to Hollister, move stuff to San Ardo. It may not be in the slot that we're normally in, but trying to get away from where all the disease was. On the conventional side and the organic side, largely the products that we have are not really that effective at this point on thrips. They're losing efficacy. And so, and then in 2023, there was some around, but there was no catastrophic crop loss. And really even this year, not a whole lot of reports on it. The incidence level is low. We're not out of the woods yet. We still have some time to go to worry about that. We do have some varieties that we started, evaluating last year, and some growers are using those varieties that are more resistant to it. My understanding is they grow pretty rapidly. A more vigorous growth kind of can grow past it to some degree. So, there has been some, development on the breeding side that's been helpful. But really, to me, I just think that, it's one of those pests that could show up, and I'm not sure we really understand all the dynamics of it yet. There seems to be a regional component to it. Once it gets going in a region, it seems to be an issue. But we have trapping now. We have access to data online to see what the traps are doing for thrips, which is the vector for impatiens necrotic spot virus. So it's been really collaborative. And we have meetings every 2 weeks or every month, kind of depending on what the pressure is, just to stay updated, working with the USDA, working with the Extension Service, in the state. So a lot going on, and it's a big focus because it is devastating. It is devastating, and while growers like it when the markets go up, if you don't have product, it doesn't really, it doesn't help anybody. And so, and we just have a whole host of challenges, but right now INSV is at a pretty low level. But it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way.
And with all of that collaboration, I'm assuming the goal or the hope is to try and narrow down some of the variables as to what makes it more problematic in some years versus others, what areas of focus might be there, or maybe potential hypothesis as to why it fluctuates quite like that.
So I think, you have to look at the biology of the insect, and sometimes it's going to be, they tumble in the air. So what are the wind currents going to be? Where are they overwintering? Are there infected weeds that, carry the virus that thrips can feed on and then become infected with the virus and move into the field? So really, I think that we don't know a lot about thrips. And so we're kind of learning, where are they picking up the virus? Where is the reservoir overwintering that they're picking it up from? A lot of work is being done in that area. And it's going to be something that just evolves because there's not just been a lot of research on it. We've dealt with it over the years with thrip damage, and it can get really bad at some, at times, but, to see this level of loss in the field, and I think it was 2020 or 2021 when it really got going. And then there's also this relationship with Pythium too, where sometimes you're getting patients necrotic spot virus and it takes out with Pythium, or maybe the Pythium, is contributing to the impatiens necrotic spot virus. So there's some kind of viral fungal complex, that is resulting from the two. So research is being done on that to some degree. We see a lot more Pythium than we used to as well. So really trying to get a handle on it. And there's a lot of research that's being done on it, and we've gotten good grant funding to pursue answers because it is important to figure out.
And then shifting gears here, we are at the Biological Summit in Salinas. Quite a few presentations. Seems like there's a bit of at least optimism around the sector, and part of this event is networking opportunities. And you were talking to me about getting together with some other industry folks and looking at what avenues might be available through the IR4 program.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough, Western growers that I work pretty closely with on a number of regards asked me to go to a dinner last night with two representatives with IR4, and IR4 is, I believe, a USDA entity that helps, get registrations of products, and specifically in California, it's really challenging with the way CDPR is looking at new products, and even if it's an IR4, where they do that additional research that's necessary. But it's been challenging. We don't have, the synthetic chemistry pipeline into California is essentially closed. CDPR, has a roadmap to sustainable pest management, where I feel that by 2050, all the synthetics that we're using are going to be gone. They want us to use biologicals like we're evaluating here at the Biological Summit. So, we need to get there. We need to figure out how to use these new products that come in. We need to understand what the expectations, be able to apply them properly. What does the effect on water chemistry have? What is the effect that your soil health of, in the field has on the use of biologicals? But really overarching to that, is start to bring, the different agricultural sectors in California together. So I'm able to represent cool season leafy green vegetables pretty well. But that was kind of the only representation of that meeting last night with IR4. But already today, talking to Morningstar about what they might need in the tomato market, and then talk to, the agronomist from Ingleby, which is growing pistachios, and really start to bring, an almond grower or whatever other markets we have to the table and say, what do you have that is available domestically that you can't use in California? And that's what IR4 does. 49 states, once EPA has finished their evaluation of a new pesticide, it's good to go in those 49 states. You have to get through CDPR in California and overcome a whole other host of obstacles, and that has been a roadblock. So even if we're unable to be successful, bringing in chemistries that EPA has approved for domestic use into California, we need to start to build a track record of effort to, bring in solutions that we need to be able to continue to feed the world. And so, really you have to start to build a new narrative about how we need to move forward and we need support, and we have to do it together. Growers need to band together because government's not going to help us solve the problems. Growers have to solve their own problems. They have to be collaborative and hopefully, working with IR4 and just keep trying and just keep pushing, even though I don't know it'll be tremendously successful just based on what we saw in the past, trying to get new chemistry in. So we haven't seen anything new in a long time. And we're dealing with even more complexities now with concerns about Endangered Species Act. And so everything is going to get seen through a new lens. And so it's just on us as industry, as producers, as growers, as people responsible to feed the world, to work together and to push back when we can and try to find solutions as well.
That was Brian German with today's featured interview. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. USDA recently announced some specialty crop and organic growers will have expanded crop insurance options available starting in the 2025 crop year. Rod Bain has more.
We are very pleased to be able to add more tools to the toolbox, especially for specialty crop growers and organic crop growers.
The crop insurance toolbox, that is. USDA Risk Management Agency Administrator Marcia Bunger says recently announced expansions of options within specialty crop and organic coverages include
expanding coverage to allow enterprise units for organic farming practices, adding enterprise unit eligibility for several crops, and then also making other improvements that benefit nut growers, fruit growers, and vegetable producers.
The increased coverage options take effect for the 2025 crop year, with more information available through local crop insurance agents or online at www.rma.usda.gov. The administrator adds,
we will continue to look at ways to start adding additional tools to lots of specialty crop grower and organic crop growers' toolboxes.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The USDA is taking another step toward more fairness in the livestock industry dealings. Gary Crawford reports.
The Packers and Stockyards Act prohibits unfair practices in meat and poultry dealings, but the question has always been,
exactly what does it mean to be unfair?
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says USDA has just put out a proposed rule that answers that question more clearly, and in doing so could open the way for more producers to bring more cases of unfair treatment through the Packers and Stockyards Act. Up to now, in most cases, producers would have to prove a practice harmed the entire industry. But under these proposed rules,
we clearly now delineate there is an opportunity for unfairness to be couched in terms of individual harm. An individual producer who might be able to establish under the elements of the new rule that the harm was specific to their operation and constituted a violation of Packers and Stockyards.
This fairness rule is the latest in a series of proposed rules aimed at giving producers what Vilsack calls an even shake in their dealings with processors and integrators.
So in combination, what we've done is we've expanded transparency and made it easier for farmers to understand the deals that they're entering into and who they're contracting with. We made sure that they couldn't be discriminated against or retaliated against. We made sure that a tournament system would operate fairly and that there would not be any specific deductions that caught farmers by surprise. And today, we provide an enforcement tool that I think will provide for greater balance in the relationship between farmer and integrator. All of this is designed to create the opportunity for more new and better markets.
But USDA is not acting alone in this. It's getting a lot of help from the Justice Department.
We can and must bring our partnership with the USDA, Packers and Stockyards Act enforcement beyond poultry into beef and other parts of our food supply chain.
Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Cantor.
That's one reason why we are putting our money where our mouth is, in hiring more lawyers and more experts related to agriculture. These lawyers, I'm pleased to announce, will be based in the Midwest and will focus on both civil and criminal ag enforcement at the Antitrust Division.
All part of a government-wide effort to provide, as Tom Vilsack puts it,
more transparency, more fairness, and more competition in the marketplace.
This is Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.